Hi, and welcome to another episode of About the Authors TV. I'm your host, Jake Brown. Texas Monthly recently reported that with more than 80 million books in print, she's the most successful author in Texas, and the steamiest. Sandra Brown is the world-famous author in question, whose blockbuster novels are filled with murder, deceit, suspense, and one steamy sex scene after another. Since 1981, she's published over 100 novels, many of which have made the New York Times bestseller list for fiction either in hardback or paperback, an incredible statistic that only a handful of authors like Stephen King and Danielle Steele have been able to match. Brown is regarded as a master of escapist American pop fiction. SheWrites.com has crowned her as notorious for the singular style of romantic suspense she has pioneered over the past 5 decades, kicking off her first prolific era of publishing way back in 1981 with Love's Encore, and then Love Beyond Reason, Eloquent Silence, A Treasure Worth Seeking, Primetime, Hidden Fires, The Silken Web, Not Even for Love, Seduction by Design, A Kiss Remembered, A Secret Splendor, Words of Silk, Bittersweet Rain, Tiger Prince, Sweet Anger, Above and Beyond, Honor Bound, Two Alone, The Thrill of Victory, Tomorrow's Promise, Relentless Desire, Heaven's Price, Temptation Kiss, In a Class by Itself, Thursday's Child, Tilly in the Morning, The Rana Look, 22 Indigo Place, Sonny Chandler's Return, Demon Rum, Tidings of Great Joy, Hawk O'Toole's Hostage, Long Time Coming, Temperatures Rising in a Whole New Light. Brown continued that hit streak with the Bed and Breakfast series, the Coleman Family Saga series, the Mason Sisters duology, and the Texas Tyler Family Saga series, before breaking out into a worldwide best-selling romantic suspense sensation, beginning with Slow Heat in Heaven, then continuing with bestseller after bestseller including Best Kept Secrets, Mirror Image, Breath of Scandal, French Silk, Shadows of Yesterday, Where There's Smoke, Charade, Love Beyond Reason, The Witness, Fat Tuesday, Unspeakable, The Alibi, Standoff, The Switch, and Envy, where USA Today celebrated her as a masterful storyteller. As her popularity exploded into new generations of readers throughout the millennium, CBS News reported that if you've been inside a bookstore in the last 20 years or scrolled through a list of top 10 ebooks, chances are you're familiar with the name Sandra Brown. Each of her last 15 books has been to the top of the New York Times bestseller list, including new hits like The Crush, Hello Darkness, White Hot, Chill Factor, Ricochet, Play Dirty, Smokescreen, Rainwater, Smash Cut, Tough Customer, Lethal, Low Pressure, Deadline, Mean Streak, Friction, Sting, Seeing Red, Tailspin, Outfox, Thick as Thieves, Blind Tiger, and Overkill most recently. She's the rightful recipient of multiple awards, including the International Thriller Writers Award and Romance Writers of America's Lifetime Achievement Awards. And she joins us today to talk all about her legendary career as one of the world's top romantic suspense masters. Sandra, thank you so much for taking out time to be with us. Now, as one of the greatest suspense novelists of your time, can we assume that you grew up reading a lot of Nancy Drew and any romance by chance?
Someone asked in an interview last week, what do you remember reading first? And I think the first thing I remember reading, and nobody will probably remember these, they were called the Bobbsey twins. And it was two girls about 10 years old, and they had a series of books. But then I was a Nancy Drew addict. I mean, just read Nancy Drew books over and over and over again. I probably read the whole series like 4 times each book. And then I remember my mother had a really attractive, I wish I'd give anything if I had them, really attractive volume of Wuthering Heights and Jane Eyre. And they were illustrated and they came in a sleeve. I can just see them. And I read those when I was probably in junior high. And then I started reading all of these sprawling saga type books, adventure books like Irwin Shaw and Thomas Costain and Frank G. Slaughter, and then gravitated into, the Agatha Christie, a lot of English writers who wrote suspense, Evelyn Anthony. And so it just, but I always read everything. No, and Daddy would do book reviews for extra money. And so publishers would send the newspaper, all of these books, and he would get them. And about once a month, bring a box, a box load home, and it was like a treasure trove to me. I would dig through there and probably read a lot that was inappropriate, age inappropriate at the time. But that's why I just read everything I could get my hands on constantly. And then going to the library, we had a bookmobile, but we always went to the library and checked out as many books as allowed. And that was, big treat, especially in the summertime.
Did you have a local librarian that helped you expand that catalog of books before you began building such a famous one of your own?
If they had a whole shelf, like Bernard Cornwell, and all of these series, and if I discovered somebody like that, then I had a whole shelf, of books to read.
What about once you were studying English at Texas Christian University? Any professors who guided you as your talent was first finding its way to the page?
You were talking about the influence, the one person reading. When I was in freshman English composition class at TCU, that we were assigned a theme, and we had to write kind of an essay kind of thing on John Donne's quote, "No man is an island." And so we knew what we were going to write about, but we couldn't take any notes in. We had to write it in a blue book under a given, class period time. And the professor read my theme to the class as an example. And so, but he still gave me a B plus. And to this day, I don't know why I didn't get an A on that paper. But anyway, that's when I first kind of knew, maybe I had some talent, for writing, because it wasn't difficult for me. Doing math or algebra or geometry or any of that didn't interest me in the least, but I loved history and I loved my writing classes, my literature classes.
Your pre-noveling career included stints as a weathercaster before promoting to Dallas-Fort Worth as an investigative reporter for WFAA-TV's PM magazine. Were you also burning the midnight oil working on your first novel back then as well?
I think always in the back of my mind, and I love my days working in television. It was always a part-time job. I was a contributor on a magazine show, and then I did the weather. When you didn't have to be a meteorologist, you just had to say it was either going to be hot or cold or sunny or rainy, But anyway, I loved that work, but I wasn't going to be a threat to anybody with going further into that. And I started writing, Jake, when I got fired from that job, because they came through one day and they said, all of you who are on air now, we want to replace with fresh faces. And so by then I had 2 children. They were toddlers and not even in preschool yet. And my husband at the time actually said, "You've always said you would love to write stories and you're so interested in that. And so you can talk about it or you can do it. And you've got time and opportunity now. It's something you don't have to get childcare to do." And so that's when I started.
Now, for those just discovering your catalog, as we ran down on the opening remarks, Women's Magazine was correct when they crowned you a truly prolific writer, because that's what you became, promising that writing a little something for everyone, you're bound to find a Sandra Brown book you absolutely love. When you and romance first found each other with your 1981 debut Love's Encore, before the fountain of follow-ups came, what do you look back on most fondly from the writing of that first novel?
I didn't know that I could do it, but I really, I wanted to. And so we got a card table set up in a spare room of the house and bought an IBM Selectric typewriter and a few reams of paper. And that's where I started.
We look forward to airing Sandra's episode on a streaming network in the near future. But for right now, we're excited to talk to her about her latest releases. By 2020, your hometown paper, the Dallas Morning News, mused that Brown deserves her own genre, and is one who writes masterfully from both the male and female protagonist points of view. Take Arden Maxwell as an example, who composes a lead character the readers are really going to want to follow from page 1 through the conclusion of a novel like Thick as Thieves, that real book spy praise to some of your best work to date.
Whether it be the male or female protagonists, and I write a lot from the male point of view, as you know. But my females, I never want to compromise on their femininity. I always want them to be feminine in their heart, but strong. That doesn't compromise their strength of character. They're all braver than I am. They all have a whole lot more courage. I'm a card-carrying coward. I'm scared of everything. But in a way that helps me write, because, things do frighten me. I'd start typing, my palms get damp, but Arden, like I think all of my other heroines, have had the strength to face up to, first of all, her sister, and then secondly, the people that, were after her. And the same way that occurred in Overkill, that Kate, she was pretty gutsy to even address Zach right away, that he would be intimidating. And so, particularly because I made her very petite, and here's a football player, and so, but I want all of my women to be smart, intelligent, to be courageous, but also never to be compromised on their femininity from the inside. Not necessarily from the outside, but from the inside.
Now, you're one of the masters at opening a book like an action film might open on the silver screen, especially when you have a veteran just home from the war jumping from a moving freight train in the opening pages of Blind Tiger, which would earn similar accolades across all your generations of readers. What for you is really required to hook the reader from page one and keep readers turning them as expertly as you have for so many bestsellers over the years?
I knew he was going to be going home from the war, and at first I didn't have him jumping off the train. First, I just had him in the fight. And I had started a different way. I can't remember now, but I called my editor and I said, never mind about that first chapter, I'm rewriting it. And I said, he's going to get in a fight. And I think I just had him getting off the train in town. But then I thought, no, the reader needs to realize what Thatcher is capable of. And so I told my editor, I said, I'd send him like the first 100 pages or something. I said, never mind that first chapter, I'm rewriting it. And he said, how? What happens? And I said, well, he gets in a fight on the train. He stabs guy in the hand. He jumps off the train, rolls down the hill, gets all banged up. And he said, oh, he said, well, that's a lot more rip-roaring. And I said, yeah, it is. And so I went with that. But yeah, I wanted the reader to know right away that Thatcher, even though he's tall, dark, the strong, silent type, he has a core, and when backed into a corner, he'll fight, and reluctantly, but kind of a Gary Cooper kind of character, taciturn, but very strong-willed. I think for me, as I said earlier, one thing is just trying to join a scene in progress to where you really don't have to know anything. A good example would be, well, there are two good examples, but I'll use the most recent one, is in Thick as Thieves. And I had no idea where this was going, but I heard this sentence in my head, this piece of dialogue, and it was like, the easiest way to get caught is to talk about it. And I heard somebody say that, and I thought, who was that? Where are they? And I wrote it down. And then all of a sudden, these people were in a ditch looking at this bag of money that they had obviously just stolen. You don't know who they were. You don't know what their story is. And I just wrote that prologue. And then I ended it with, that was at, whatever hour it was. But anyway, it said, by sunrise, one was, let's see how to put it. Anyway, one was in the hospital, and one had been caught, was in the hospital, and one was dead. Okay, now who's going to read that and not want to know who are those people? You know, and so I sent the prologue to my editor, and he was like, "Oh, I love it. I love it. What's the rest?" I said, "I have no idea. This is where I'm going to start. This is what I'm starting with. Don't worry so much about acquainting your reader, even with physical characteristics right away. Let their dialogue speak for them so that they start getting, an idea of the terrible trouble that this character is going to get in." And the other thing that I said earlier is plant a question in the reader's mind. And it doesn't it could be as basic as who done it. And you're going to wait the whole book until, the Agatha Christie-esque kind of villain is revealed. Or it can be something very subliminal. It can be like, well, which one died? And how did he die? Which one got caught? Which one's in jail? Which one's in the hospital? That's what I said. I said one was in jail, one was in the hospital, one was in the morgue, and one got away. So you've got 4 characters now. So I asked very basic, planted very basic questions in the reader's mind. Sometimes it's not that obvious, and someone smarter than I've always had this little Post-it, and it says, "Start with the snake." And so you start with the snake, and then go back and let the reader catch up with you. Oh my God, but it should be something that plants all these questions in their mind. They got to find out what happens next.
CBS News in a recent feature attributed your rare breed of longevity to a bountiful imagination, combined with a hefty amount of discipline, determination, and talent that's resulted in 60 New York Times bestsellers, many of which have been translated into 34 languages, including your most recent global hit, Overkill, which indulges your lifelong love of football as source material. Please take viewers inside the world of the former Super Bowl MVP quarterback Zach Bridger and the cinematic saga that you sent him on here.
The character, for one thing. I'm a big football fan, not so much as of last night. We won't go into that. My team lost on Sunday Night Football, but I love football, grew up on it, being from Texas. And so this is the second book I've written about a football player. The first one was, oh gosh, what's the title of it? Griff was the character, Play Dirty. And so when I was plotting this book, the idea came to me about having to determine whether or not to take someone off life support and how difficult it would be under any circumstances, how much more difficult it would be if you had to do it with a spotlight shined on you. How much more difficult it would be if it were someone you loved. Wouldn't it complicate the matter more if it was someone that you hated? And you still had to make that decision in a public forum, global forum. So I thought, I need somebody really famous. And I was thinking about Tom Brady at that time was trying to decide if he was going to retire or what. And he was, his wife and him were exposed, his children were exposed, family, coaches, other players, everybody, had an opinion. And I thought, make him a football player, a Super Bowl MVP. It's something you're interested in. And so from the get-go, I was interested in Zach's psychology. And I was worried how how in the world is he going to get out of this? How is his problem going to be solved? And I thought, if I'm worried about it, if I'm worried about how I'm going to solve it in the book, then I have to believe the reader from the get-go will be worried about what's he going to do. And that was one way. I mean, I enjoyed seeing the character arc he made. From the recluse, he was bitter. He was, didn't want anything to do with anybody, just everybody leave me alone, to again being thrust in the spotlight and having to cope with it in a much braver way than he coped with it the first time.
Many storytellers that we talk to say they have really no choice but to keep writing until, as Dean Koontz has said, his head falls into the typewriter. What keeps you inspired when you're in that moment of creation working on a new novel?
I've just started, actually. I was working before our interview. I was working on chapter 2, the end of chapter 2 of a new book. Has no title yet. I know what it's going to be about. I know what the terrible trouble is, and it's very, very contemporary. It will be something, just very much the way Overkill was. Overkill, I wrote, during COVID when families were having to make this awful decision. And so that kind of gave me the idea. This is as contemporary from a societal standpoint. And and I think I've got 2 good characters. They've got a real problem to sort out. So yeah, I'm excited about it, but I can't really talk too much about it because I don't know everything yet. I don't even have a title. It takes me usually 3 or 4 months to do the first draft, because that's when I'm really, feeling my way through the story. And I have a life and I like to live it. And then, but the really best part for me is when the first draft is done and I go back and I write and I rewrite and I rewrite and I rewrite every scene dozens of times until I have squeezed every single thing I can out of that scene.
Sandra, it's been an absolute thrill speaking today. Thank you so much for taking out time to be on About the Authors TV.
Thanks so much, Jake.